A motion input is when you execute a specific directional motion on your D-pad or analog stick, followed by a button press, to execute a special attack in a fighting game. Many modern games have moved towards simpler inputs, such as single or double button presses to execute these attacks. As games in general move towards accessibility and inclusivity, motion inputs have become a controversial topic amongst fighting game players, both new and old. For some people, motion inputs are viewed as an arbitrary complication and barrier to entry for fighting games, while others see it as an enjoyable part of the learning process that leads to the feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment once mastered and implemented into their skill set. The biggest hurdle that developers are facing regarding fighting games in the modern day is accessibility. Fighting games tend to have a niche but loyal fan base compared to some of the mainstream genres, such as FPS or MOBA games, so it has become a common trend to diminish the barrier of entry to help new players get their foot in the door. There have been good ways and bad ways of doing this in each new fighting game. All have their fair share of well-implemented and poorly implemented accessibility ideas. The goal here should be to lower the skill floor without bringing down the skill ceiling, guide players to a higher level rather than starting them at one. I am all for making fighting games more accessible and widely loved, but I do not believe that the complete removal of complex inputs is healthy or productive for fighting games as a whole. Motion inputs are proven and fundamental mechanics for adding depth, variety, skill development, and longevity to these games, and I will give a brief breakdown of why I believe that. The Dragon Punch, also known as the Shoryuken, is arguably the most iconic and widely recognized fighting game special of all time. Let's look deeper into what makes this move so memorable and powerful. It may vary from game to game, but generally some of the common attributes of the Dragon Punch are invincibility or invulnerability, quick startup time, high damage, and versatility. Sounds overpowered, right? Well, no, not really. In theory, if you could execute this move with frame-perfect timing at the drop of a hat every time you acquired it, then it very well could be, but no one can do that, as it requires a special reaction and an input process to be executed. This adds an important layer of depth into the design of a special move that allows for greater variety and identity in characters and their attacks. What would happen if you did make this attack available to players with a single button press? It would remove almost all room for error, making its execution unsatisfying, unimpressive, easy, and overpowered. To circumvent this effect, developers would have to strip down the Dragon Punch of some of its key strengths to make it fair, such as removing its invincibility, slowing down its startup time, severely limiting its damage and versatility, or all of the above. This kind of balance destroys the identity of the Dragon Punch and then also must be applied to almost every other special move in the game. This is what leads to watered down characters and cookie cutter movesets that have blurred strengths and weaknesses, constrained or limited potential for varied playstyles, and weakened identities. I do believe it is essential for a fighting game to have challenging mechanical demands for the enjoyment of both the players and spectators. Not every single attack needs to be locked behind an execution barrier, and not all fighting games use motion inputs for attacks, but some still manage to be highly competitive and long-lasting. Games like Tekken and Melee don't tend to require challenging inputs for their special moves, but they make up for it in plenty of other ways, such as complex and deep movement mechanics, or combos that rely on precision, spacing, and timing. It's harder for traditional 2D fighters to add the same level of complexity to their movement, so that is why motion inputs are prominent. A deeply satisfying fighting game can have it all: challenging inputs and combos, advanced movement options, and deep strategy, while still being accessible and enjoyable for newcomers. It just requires a varied design approach that implements learning curves on every mechanical level and forgoes these sweeping decisions to remove entire avenues of balancing methods. Design a game for the people who will still be playing it 5 to 10 years after its release, not for the people who will play for a week before moving on. Your game will live a long life if there is expansive room for mechanical exploration and mastery. Thanks for watching. I'd also like to recommend a video from Day9, a former professional StarCraft player and commentator who makes a great case for complexity in competitive games. I'll link it in the description.